Rescue crew. All right, and then the National Security Act allowed the president to act how? To do what? Say that again? Yeah, it was an imperial presidency.
Allow for
You can make
military action.
Military action in secrets. And what was the justification for keeping secrets? Because of? Yeah, there's spies out there. There's enemies. That'd be the justification, and they would say the words, and you've all heard this. You can't know this because of national security. So whenever you hear that, it comes from this law. That is the legal justification to keep secrets because of national security. And so, because the president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, and technically with the National Security Act, we're always at war, that pretty much allows the president to do whatever the president wants. It's a shadow government will be created by this. Nobody really knows what they're doing. And it's actually quite remarkable. One of the biggest parts of the U.S. budget goes to these intelligence agencies. And no one knows what they're doing, what they do. And, for example, when they screw up really badly, like the CIA did in the 1980s, or when everybody in the intelligence agency screwed up in 2001, what happened? They got more money.
What happened in 2001?
Oh, how did they screw up? Well, there's so many indications. They should.
Yeah, they knew like a lot.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah, what happened in 2001? And so, here's the thing about this. The National Security Act is one of these hinge moments. It changes America dramatically. It is now in war.
Is it, like, I know in movies lots of times there's stuff like that the CIA knows they don't tell the president or people like that. Does that happen ever?
Very little.
Very little.
It can happen
So the president,
because there's a massive bureaucracy.
the president knows mostly everything that goes on.
Not everything, but the important things. Anything of consequence, the president almost certainly knows. Yeah, there'll be instances where the president does not trust the hierarchy of the CIA and try to go around it. Kennedy didn't like it; he liked his own kind of intelligence stuff. But President Bush did.
But there's nothing related directly to the CIA.
That's exaggerated for good movie stuff.
I was just wondering how accurate.
What was he planning to aid Western Europe called? Marshall Plan. Marshall Plan. Lend-Lease did during the war. The Marshall Plan. Well, here's the thing now. Here we have Marshall Plan A coming into to occupation zones in Germany and the rest of Western Europe. Well, the occupation zone of Germany, the British, the American, and the French was right here. They're still using occupation script. Basically, money issued by the three occupation armies. They don't have their own financial system. And basically, they'll never be able to fully rebuild their economy until they have a financial system, a banking system, and an ability to collect taxes, meaning their own currency. So in 1948, the Western Allies created the Deutschmark, DM, a currency for the West. So they created a currency and said their taxes must come in this currency, etc. But it only applies to the Western occupation zones. In essence, tying all three zones together, therefore creating a country, West Germany. In essence, they're creating a West Germany, which would officially happen the next year. But everybody knew, especially Stalin, who saw this as a great threat. Remember his big fear, that they're going to somehow rearm the Germans and send them back. See, they're doing it already. By the way,
Is that why you kept East Germany?
well, he still kind of hinted that there would be a four-power agreement to reunify. But as soon as they created West Germany, they would create an East Germany.
And he personally make it as horrible as it was.
No, actually, the Germans did a lot of that to themselves. Yeah. The Germans, well, you know, why did they do that? Because the Allies were in the West.
Those are white people.
And so the Allies made sure that it was going to be people who wanted a Republican form of government. And the first leaders of it would be anti-Nazis. And they have a different background than the East. In East, he made sure it's people who agreed with Stalin. They made the capital a little tiny town on the Rhine River called Bonn. And that would be the capital of West Germany. And they did it on purpose because it was never meant to be the permanent capital. There was always this idea that there would be, once again, a single Germany, and the capital would be Berlin, Prague. So Bonn today is this massive government town with nobody living there. They have these huge, well-kept buildings, and really kind of empty. It's kind of surreal.
They built like a whole capital.
Yeah, the whole capital out of a little tiny town, and then they moved everything to Berlin after reunification. Oh, there are people there, but it's just kind of weird. You know, this massive legislative building and things like that. Well, Stalin was furious, absolutely furious. This he saw it as a direct threat to him. And he really looked at it. Here they come again. Well, remember, Stalin has the East. In the East are the Allied occupation zones of Berlin. And so, this map shows it pretty good. Actually, let's put this one on first. Part of the problem was Stalin was using really bad maps. Those are the occupation zones. Here's Berlin, right in the middle. They gave all this area to Poland, British, French, American. Now there are 3 corridors to the Allied occupation zones to resupply the troops there for the US, the French, and the British. Basically, there was a railroad, an autobahn, and then the air corridor over that, generally on these 3 paths that the Soviets were supposed to let them through. It was more like just a designated area. It was supposed to be open borders. Berlin was wide open. People could go back and forth at will. Well, what Stalin did was this. What Stalin did was this. These corridors, and here's the Berlin, here's the occupation zone. Oh, and it says right here, Tempelhof, Gatow, and Tegel. Those were airports in each of the occupation zones. Tempelhof, the Tempelhof district was the American occupation zone. So my brother-in-law he lived in the Tempelhof of the American zone, lived right near the big airport. Now it's not airport. Now it's just people walk their dogs there. It's really weird. But what he did is this. Stalin cut off the land corridors. Did the bridges need to be repaired? Roads need reconstruction. Cut off the land roads. Stalin blockaded.
He stalled the advance.
Minus 8.
Stalin blockaded it. He was giving the West a choice. If you want West Germany, you lose Berlin. There's your choice, Berlin or West Germany. He assumed that there's no way they could resupply through air, by the air. And it's not just the some 18,000 Allied troops, or Western Allied troops in Berlin. There's also 3 million civilians who lived in West Berlin. And Stalin effectively cut them all off and made sure very little could cross over from the east, even though technically the borders were supposed to be open. This looked like war. Now, to the American point of view, this seemed like a very aggressive move by Stalin. Stalin was a very defensive move to his point of view. He was fearful of a powerful West Germany. Once again, remember we talked about both sides are ignorant about the other's point of view. Truman
why did the Deutschmark make West Germany so strong against such a threat? Is it just because they were like recovering?
Yeah, it was making a West Germany. And Stalin always assumed, or at least had his fear, that the West would rearm Germany and send it back again. So it's like the first step. Truman would initiate the Berlin Airlift. And for 11 months, US and British planes, the French had very few planes yet, resupplied Berlin. At first it was pretty hectic, but pretty soon they formed literally an airborne carpet of planes coming into the 3 airfields day and night. And food was important, but the big thing was fuel. Coal was the main source of heat. Think how much coal you had to bring in. Relatively small transport planes in this era, coal took up a lot of the weight, and it worked. After a few months, they were able to get just enough food in for the Berliners to survive. And they would bring, there's stories of them dropping little bits of candy and things for the children of Berlin, enough to survive. And the Berlin Airlift is going to have this kind of mystical feeling then in the Cold War. They beat back the Soviets, stood Stalin down, did not back down. There's a great Berlin Airlift museum there. Would have all the kind of the food they brought in, like canned cheese and things like that, so it doesn't rot. Washington State University, their agricultural school makes cheese. And they cheddar cheese, white cheddar, and they sell it in cans. And it's really good. I'm not kidding. It's really good. Anybody know that? You can't unicorns. See, not only do you learn about the Berlin Airlift, you learn about cheese. And cheese represents democracy. Okay, so after 11 months, Stalin backed down. Stalin backed down the Berlin Airlift. Now, Truman saw this as a great victory. But by unilaterally doing this, he caused it too. And so, yeah, they stood Stalin down, but tensions were rising fast, especially, see what's going to happen in 1949. This is really going to change attitudes in Germany towards the United States and Britain, towards the, well, there were still British, French, Canadian, and US troops. There still are. Here, up to 48, it was an occupying army. Nobody likes an occupying army. American soldiers were told, and all British soldiers, Canadian soldiers, don't go out at night. Don't go out alone. Don't fraternize with the enemy, because they still think you're the enemy. The airlift changed things. To many Germans, not completely, of course not. But the British and the Americans especially the Americans, went from being occupiers to protectors from the Soviet Union. A big shift. You combine that with Marshall Plan A, and for a good 20 years, the United States is going to, well, they're rightfully so. The opinion of the United States will go up. Because see what's happening in the East? There was a real threat from Stalin, even though we greatly exaggerated it. Things would change in the 70s and 80s, attitudes towards the United States, for lots of reasons. Big deal, Berlin Airlift. But then all hell would break loose. But before we get to that, there's an election. And the thing was, while the Cold War is going on, the situation in the United States was changing dramatically fast. Yeah, there's demobilization, but our whole country's changing in the 1940s. By 1947 into 48, the American economy took off, and it began unprecedented economic growth that would go from 48, with a few recessions here and there, but most of them were caused by the Federal Reserve just to slow the economy down, would go all the way through the 1970s. Unbelievable economic growth. It's coming, yeah. The affluent society. Unprecedented economic growth. Had never seen anything like it. And the big thing was this. Productivity. Now, we mentioned this once before. Affluent society. That's a you. Ha ha. You. More people had more money than ever before. And the reason was this. Productivity. The amount a worker does, or the amount of work a worker does in a day, went up on an average of 3% a year, all the way up to 1974. This is huge. Workers are able to build more. But the thing was workers benefited from this. Workers got wage growth. Wage growth, that's just, imagine there's nothing there. Matched productivity. It didn't all go to the top, it went to the workers. And that is because of the New Deal. Combination of the Great Compression, high income taxes, and labor unions. The Great Depression. It's not like that today. Productivity is really high. Today it's stagnant, it's less than 1%. Well, you hear people all the time say, machines and robots are taking over people's jobs and people don't have enough skills because of these new technologies. No, that's not happening at all. If that was happening, productivity growth would be really high and wages for those people would be going up. That's not happening now. Productivity is low and wages for all fields are stagnant. So that is simply not happening.
What was productivity?
Combination of workers working harder to take advantage of the high growth and technological changes. Changes in capital. There would be a small, it would go down again in the 70s and 80s, it would go up a little bit in the 90s, not near what the golden age of productivity growth. Yeah, but that was, a lot of that was illusionary and it would go back down dramatically. Now it's just low productivity.
Is productivity actually lower, or is just the growth lower?
The growth is low.
Okay.
But
we're physically still higher though, right?
yeah, physically higher, but what happens if productivity growth is stagnant? If productivity growth is stagnant, that means that essentially workers are creating more wealth. And so the whole wealth inside of the economy, maybe not, it is shrinking as the population gets bigger. So, what it means is more people than ever before could afford that middle class life. More people could buy that car, could buy that washing machine, which is a big deal. The television in the 1950s became huge. Think about TV. It's no coincidence that you have this growth of a consumer economy where more people buying stuff than ever before, and TV. Not only TV is a big consumer good, but what else does TV do? Advertisements. The second golden age of advertising would be in the 1950s because of television. To get that word out. More middle class than ever before. And something else. Days of, or years of depression and war. Because of this, birth rates go down. They always do. Birth rate for obvious reasons in war, but also depression. People realize it's not a good time to have children. Birth rates did drop a little bit in 2008, 2009, 2010 worldwide because of the lesser depression or the Great Recession, whatever you like to call it. But all of a sudden now, by 46, 47, a hopeful future. So what happened? What do we call it? Baby boom. And it would go to the mid-1960s, and birth rate did drop, not dramatically, but a huge increase in the birth rate. And so you're going to have this entire generation that's going to grow up knowing only this affluent society. And it's going to be quite a discord between them and the generation that grew up in the Great Depression. And then there's going to be a distance between them and you folks. I'm in the middle. I'm not baby boom. I'm obviously pre-baby boom, 1922.
There's so used to be like with innovations, why is that?
They're actually not very good at innovation. It's not necessarily good at innovations. And more than anything else, as you get older, you don't want to do things. And I see it as a teacher. Students were much more computer savvy 10 years ago than they are today.
Was there a?
It's very long. The
Huh?
definition of savvy is-
Yeah.
And that's why they're,
Yeah, actually, it's probably good for Japan that their population is growing.
right, because they
It's going up. Not as high as it used to, but it's still going up. And yeah, that's true though. Computer savvy people don't know as much today as they used to, which is just because it was new and exciting. Now it's like you don't know any different, right? So it's just nothing. It's no big deal to you.
When you look at like the amounts to know though, like we have so much, there's so much more to be able to do like with a computer today than there was when the computers like were first.
Of course, but you don't have to know anything to do it. That's part of the thing about computers. You don't necessarily have to know. So, with that, with this, let's get to the next step. We're going to put everybody. Nobody built houses between 1930 and 1945. Great Depression, then war. Heck, there are like 20 houses that were built in that era in Helena.
Oh,
Oh no, I like it. US built 20
And
houses.
I live in one of them. My house was built in 1936. One of the few houses built during the Great Depression in Helena. This is nationwide. So we're going to have a major overcrowding problem. What's going to happen to rents? Yeah, this is going to be a big issue. Where do you put everybody? Yeah.
Did you buy your house partially on that map? Did you buy your house partially?
I built it.
You said that. See, 1922, we were in 12.
About 6 or 7 days.
Did you walk back and forth from Miles City?
Uphill.
I had to swim uphill through gator-infested swamp,
Miles.
through frozen gator-infested swamp. All right, so what came out of this with the suburbs? The growth of suburbs. Land is relatively cheap, and you know that, anything about real estate here in Helena. Homes in the town are significantly more expensive than homes in the valley. Significantly more. And so, suburbs. And there had been suburbs before, but what made this different was the automobile. Suburbs, as we know it, could not have happened without cars. They were all specifically designed to not only be able to use a car to get anywhere now, because the suburb is relatively isolated, but if you've ever seen a suburb, Sunhaven, to a lesser degree, is kind of like how the big suburbs in the east are. You notice they go away from the nice grid blocks, small blocks that were designed to walk and move fast.
Can we make it crazy complicated?
Hmm?
They make the roads like crazy.
Yeah. There's no real, and you notice there's limited sidewalks because everybody's going to be driving. Why do you need a car? I mean, I'm sorry, why do you need to walk or a bike?
But why do they make them so weird?
Why do they make them so weird? Because they felt like we don't need to have them into these nice little grid. So we can make it partially, it's kind of like a unique, something new and modern. But also, force people to drive here.
Is that why they have the maps in suburbs?
And-
Like the auto industry.
Oh, yeah.
Design industry, so.
Oh yeah, they go. And why do you think there's no mass transit to these things? Yeah, they're all working together. Standard Oil and General Motors actually bought up the best mass transportation system in the world and ripped it up so they could have cars to the suburbs. Have you been to Los Angeles? The best mass transit system in the world was called the Red Line, the trolley system in Los Angeles. General Motors and Standard Oil bought it and ripped it out. So everyone had to have cars. Or buses. And now you go to Los Angeles and what do? If you want to go anywhere, what do?
Get a taxi.
Or even if you get a taxi, you just have a lot of time to enjoy being in a car.
Do they still have designs for that, or are they just still
Now the infrastructure has changed so much, it's hard to do it again.
It's maybe 2 miles.
Yeah, we're paying for this, but here's the thing. They need a car. But here's another thing that's really important then. Okay, well, we gotta get these houses up quick. A man by the name of Bill Levitt. Bill Levitt, who actually was he's part of the Navy engineers. Actually, they call them construction battalions, or CBs. That's a term of Navy infantry. Construction battalion, CB. Well, Bill Levitt was talking to guys who were in the Army with him, and asked them, all right, what do you want when you get home? What do they all say? A home. Home was number one. I want a house of my own. In fact, maybe put us someplace next to it. The biggest thing about this middle class lifestyle, to show that you've made it, is you get your own house. And you see this all the time where people will go into unbelievably huge amounts of debt because they want to have the house, because that's what it means to be an American. They want a house. And so, Bill Levitt said, okay, that's it. He took the ideas of the assembly line and brought it to home construction. He made a town called Levittown. And soon there would be other Levitt towns. The prototypical suburb. And what they did is, okay, the assembly line, think about you move the car from worker to worker. Well, you move the crew from home to home. So you have a foundation crew. You have, what am I trying to say? Right. The framing crew. You have the roofing crew. You have the shingling crew. You have the carpeting crew. You have all these crews. And they just go boom, 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 boom.
And they're on the same house.
Yeah. They basically have 2 or 3 slightly different prefabricated houses. Have you seen those? Where they're all the same, just with slight variation. Mm-hmm. And yeah, they're all prefab now. And they're more differences now. They're better at it, but still, they're all basically the same house.
Suburbs now, but they have like the one with all the extensions, and they're like, this house will last 130,000, but you will only have 3 houses.
They add a little bit more. Back then, they were all the same. And what he said, his advertisement was, even before he built them, he sold them before they even had a foundation down. This was clever. He bought the land, not even a house built. And the ad was, "Dear Mr. Veteran, we have a house for you. For only 100 down, $79.10, you could buy a new house." $7,910. And $100 down. And $100 down. It's a different era, right? And then he took that money and used that as seed money to begin to build, and then built the rest. And then soon everybody copied. And if you've ever been to one of these suburbs, a Levittown, it's mile after mile the same home. But think about it. People lived on top of each other in cramped apartments, and all of a sudden they have a home. They can plant a tree, have a place for their children to play, because there's a lot of them now. We can plant a tree. Hey, don't take it for granted. If you live in an area that doesn't have, if you live in an area that's all cement, tree sounds pretty good. So, people left the urban areas and went to the suburbs. Who was not allowed in? Blacks were not allowed in. Everybody had to get down. They were all segregated. Blacks weren't allowed in. In fact, Levitt made it very clear. Almost everyone followed. No blacks. Partially by government policy to keep insurance rates high, or to raise insurance rates if there's blacks in the neighborhood. Yeah, they just were segregated, really segregated.
Yes, you have higher interest rates.
Yeah, there was a program called, and it was called redlining, where they would literally put a red line in areas where they had higher home insurance. So basically, you couldn't get home insurance because the rates are so high. And where are all these areas? where there are poor black people living. And so they made it very clear, if you allow a black person into this neighborhood, your insurance rates go for everybody. So that kept them out. This was policy. Hey, if you want to know why African Americans have about 20%, or I'm sorry, 1/20th the wealth of the average white family, stuff like this today. That's what it is today.
Why was it higher if you were black?
Because they figured blacks would destroy the house because it was racist. But let's be clear about it. That would be the justification, the real reason to keep blacks out. We just want to keep blacks out.
So it's just flat out racism.
Yeah, flat out racism. But one more thing then. What we have in return by the 1960s, urban blight. Because who's left in the cities? The poor. Anybody who could get out to the suburbs and buy that little piece of heaven left. Who's left in the cities? And most of the really rich. What happened to the tax base of the cities? Gone. Gone. So what happened to city services, from fire to garbage to schools to sewer? What happened? Fell apart. There's a reason why cities begin to fall apart. Crime is going to go up. There's going to be riots in the 1960s and 70s because of conditions in the cities. It's a real problem that still exists today. If you go to certain parts of like Philadelphia, it's like, whoa, it's pretty amazing. Or you see the same thing in Billings. It's a big city, Billings. But, and a couple more things then. Oh, and then all the lead everyone was sucking up. In 1946, also, for the first time since 1930, the Republicans took control of the Congress. Yes, there's still a Democratic president, Truman, but the Republicans are in charge. You know, it was more like, we're tired of war, we want to change. There was an economic depression, so the Democrats get blamed. The Republicans. And the number one goal of the Republicans was to do what to the New Deal? Get rid of the New Deal. Knowing that Truman would veto it. And it was conservative Republicans and conservative Democrats from the South.
So, did they run on that platform that we want to get rid of the New Deal? Or was that just kind of there, like?
No, they couldn't, because the New Deal was too popular.
Yeah.
And they did get one success to their point of view. Overriding Truman's veto in 1947, Congress passed the Taft-Hartley bill.
1947.
Now, 1947. The Taft-Hartley bill was a severe limitation to the Wagner Act. The Wagner Act allowed for what? You remember? It was part of the New Deal. Labor unions, yes. It allowed for labor unions. It severely restricted the Wagner Act. It made it harder for unions to organize. It made it harder to strike. Especially, they got rid of sit-down strikes.
So,
No sit-down strikes.
you want the enforcement of that? If they just do a sit-down strike and go on.
Well, technically now they could be accused of restraint of trade and be arrested under the Sherman Antitrust Act. Now, because what they said is sit-down strikes are restraint of trade. And another thing, they had to say that all labor unions had to do a loyalty oath. They should have not communists. They couldn't contribute politically. It was a major effort to weaken labor unions. Truman vetoed it. They overrode his veto. Democratic presidents would try to get rid of this for a very long time, and they failed every time because of a coalition of conservative Democrats and Republicans. It's still here today, and it didn't immediately weaken labor unions, but by the 1970s it began to show, and by the 1980s labor or union membership began to drop dramatically. It was at 40% at the end of the 1940s. Now it is about 8% are members of labor unions, and there has been a corresponding drop in wages, which was the plan, to drop wages. So everyone got that. Wages for workers dropped. But remember, this is part of trickle-down economics. They don't call it trickle-down economics. What do they call it today? Supply side. All right. So in the election of 1948, this is going to be a big election. We have the future of the New Deal, but also the Cold War. And 4 candidates are going to run. 4. So let's do this real quick. The Democrats reluctantly nominated Truman, and Truman reluctantly accepted it. He didn't want to run, but he didn't want to look like he was backing down. He actually offered the nomination to Dwight Eisenhower, who was the commander of all Allied forces in Europe still, and Eisenhower turned him down because Eisenhower wasn't a member of any political party. He would eventually decide in 1952 he was a Republican and become president. He had no idea. I think it's kind of funny. Truman, though, had a program. And let's see if you can guess where he got the name for his program. It's called the Fair Deal. Any guess? Anybody want to guess? It was to finish the what? The New Deal. And the basic part of this program were 4 parts. Number 1, health insurance. Some kind of national health insurance program. Number 2, massive aid for education, including college. And once again, thankfully, that didn't happen, huh? Number 3, reduce poverty. There's still very high poverty. How we would do it, they bantered apart guaranteed income, perhaps jobs, not clear. And lastly, civil rights. Now, in this context, civil rights means between the races, equal rights for African Americans. And think about it, Truman's a Southerner. This is a big deal. In fact, Truman desegregated the military. He ordered the armed forces to get rid of the separate black units and start allowing more blacks as officers. Basically, he said there could be no restrictions because of race. Meaning the Army said, the Army's going to fall apart, we won't be able to fight, morale would drop if you force black and white units together. But what happened? It worked shockingly well. And it made the Army strong, in a way. But Southern Democrats were furious, and they left the party. Much like 1860, Southern Democrats formed their own party called the States' Rights Party. But everybody called them the Dixiecrats. And they nominated the segregationist governor of South Carolina, Strom Thurmond. Strom Thurmond. And what's his policy? It wasn't a real organized party, but it's segregation now, segregation forever. Strom Thurmond of South Carolina, the Dixiecrats. Strom Thurmond would eventually become a senator, and he would become the first major Southern politician, Southern Democrat, to switch to the Republican Party over civil rights. Soon they all will. Yeah, even though today there are more Democrats nationwide than Republicans, yeah. This will lead to more independence, but there's just now the South is a Republican bloc. Did the bell ring? I thought the bell was supposed to. Oh, it's 11:32. Oh, we still have another minute. Okay, take your time. Oh, I have good news for all of you. Review sessions. I might do another one, but the review session is Sunday, May 3rd at 6, Tuesday, May 5th at 6:30. Sound good? If there's a huge numbers of conflicts, let me know. We still have a couple weeks, and I'll come up with more time. Those are the 2 definite ones. All right, let's look at this thing and see if you got everything down.
Yes, it's the best part.
Everything is fine. There might be one more thing to need.
This is the map. It's